Hello, everyone. Welcome to Momming and Thriving. Today, I have a very close friend, one of the most passionate people I know. Yi-Hwa is someone that she is passionate about what she does, and I thought it's only right to invite her since we're talking about pursuing your passion today. Yi-Hwa is a writer, editor, author, and a multimedia creative. She's the founding editor in chief of the Women's Health Idealist magazine. She's held a variety of professional posts over the last 20 years, and she's recently won the Emirates Literature Festival Writing Prize in 2023. So she is very good at what she does. She's an amazing editor, and most of all, she's a very dear friend. Thank you so much for joining us today, Yi-Hwa.
Thank you for having me and for all the lovely things you just said.
Is there anything I've not mentioned that I would like you to just share to our listeners about what you do and just your background? Give us a little bit of information about your background and what you do. As a professional first, then we'll dive into your formative years next.
Okay. Well, as a professional, I guess what I probably would say is that I've had like a real mix of backgrounds in media. So I've done digital and print, everything from magazines to startups to big corporations. And sort of in a way, I think sometimes people have asked me, is it strange that you haven't stuck to sort of one line in media? But to be honest, I think they all have a common thread, which is storytelling. And I really have come to appreciate the variety of backgrounds. It's one of the reasons why I was seeking it, because I thought if I try all the different ways of doing it, then I can hopefully get better at all the different ways to do what I do.
Can you tell us about, let's go back to when you won the award, the Emirates Literature Writing Festivals Award, the one for this year. You got the first place. And can you take us back to that evening and that feeling of just winning this prestigious prize?
So the irony is the feeling is really difficult to put into words. It's really just, I don't know, a really powerful combination of emotions. So I entered that when I was going through a really difficult time of my life, like personally, and just with a lot of sort of, I don't want to say struggles, but I guess that's probably the best way to describe them. Everything on the surface of my life seemed fine, but I was going through a lot internally and in terms of my health, mentally and physically, and also had a lot going on in my family and the people around me. And there was just a lot of instability in my life, I guess is the best way to put it. And actually, I had the previous year at the previous Lit Fest, again, also with absolute shock because I really didn't think I would win. I had won a place in the Emirates Literature Festival First Chapter Siddiqui Fellowship. So it was the inaugural edition of this fellowship where they were selecting some writers in the region that they believed had some talent that could be nurtured. And I was utterly shocked and super grateful to have won. Also extremely grateful to my friend Stacey, who is a brilliant writer. And without her, I know I would never have entered that prize because I didn't have the courage to. And despite the fact that I had been working for so long and, paid to write and work with words, I lacked confidence when it came to books because it is a completely different ballgame. And it was a journey unlike anything that I had experienced before. And so I didn't have the confidence to think I could enter or win. And Stacey encouraged me. And I came to a point in my life where, again, I had also been going through a very hard time. The last few years have been quite challenging for me in a number of ways. And I came to a point where I just thought, well, I kind of got nothing to lose. And so I entered, utterly shocked to have won that. And it was absolutely wonderful because it gave me a sense of community that I don't think I had ever had as a writer. And it's sort of strange for me to say that because despite the fact that I've worked in media for all these years, and obviously I'm surrounded by other writers, I never had felt that sense of fellowship, for lack of a better word. I mean, it's called that for a reason. It's funny, every time I say that, my partner mocks me and he calls me Frodo because there's obviously that Lord of the Rings association.
Oh, Fellowship of the Rings, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, that is precisely what it is. And we really were a fellowship. And it's perhaps a little cheesy to say, but we had this incredibly strong bond. And I think the other thing I truly appreciated from it is that there were so many learning opportunities. And it's one of the reasons why I was so excited to win, because I have this belief that has led me through most things in my life with my career and pretty much every other part of my life, which is that the love of learning kind of steers a lot of what I do and the direction that my life has gone into. And I think that the moment we lose our love of learning or think that we know everything and we don't have the capacity to learn more, that's when we're in trouble. And I think some of the most inspiring people in the world have, expressed similar sentiments in the sense that they, whenever I, watch a TED Talk or something that inspires me, they often say the same thing. And so I really learned to embrace that love of learning. And
Mm-hmm.
in the fellowship year, there were so many new things I discovered about the craft of writing. So, first of all, writing a book is so different than journalism, comms writing, copywriting for media agencies, and sort of marketing content. It's so vastly different. In many ways, it's actually kind of the opposite. And the things that we're taught to do are very different. On the other hand, the craft of writing is still the craft of good writing. Learning
Of
how to write
writing. Yeah.
tighter, write better story is storytelling ultimately. And the things I've learned from that fellowship year to improve the way I could write my novel have actually helped improve my career as well. So it's been this wonderful sort of back and forth constant feed. Yet despite that amazing year where I was mentored by this wonderful, wonderful person, Patrick Gale, he's a famous writer and screenwriter, and he's based in the UK. And I'm so grateful that he chose me and saw something to nurture during this fellowship. And it's funny because I often tell my partner, with Patrick, it's not like I had hundreds and hundreds of sessions with him, but each session that I had with this person was worth its weight in gold because he has a wonderful ability to kind of the opposite of me, actually. I talk a lot. He distills his advice in such compact statements. And it's very profound because I often find myself coming back to small observations he had made, bits and pieces of advice that he has given me. And since the
Mm-hmm.
fellowship ended, I still keep coming back to that. And so I wish, hopefully one day I'll get the chance to tell him how much it's impacted me even after our fellowship ended. But during that fellowship year, I had learned so much about the craft of writing. And I had come up, I think part of my fear with finishing the first draft of my first novel was that what if I finish this and I don't have another great idea? And I panicked about that a little bit. And I think on some psychological level, that was stopping me from finishing it. And I just came to a point where I thought, oh, for goodness sake, just stop it and just finish the dang book. And when I got the first draft out, boom, everything just started flowing. All these other ideas started coming along and I didn't have to fight for it. In fact, I kind of have the opposite problem now where it's like I've got so many ideas. I just need time to finish and write them all. And that feels
Mm.
like a wonderful thing. So I started writing my second novel in between, like sort of, I want to call it the marination phase of my first draft and my second draft edit of my first novel. And so when I finished the first draft of my first novel, I had sent it through to Patrick for some feedback. And I also needed to take my own eyes off of it for a while because I don't think I could have seen it as clearly or any of the mistakes or changes that needed to happen because I'd been too close to it. So during that time, I didn't want to lose the momentum. I had come into a very strong routine of writing and I just thought, okay, let's not lose this. I'm going to keep on going. It's kind of like when you're sort of following a really strict gym program, obviously you're not going to maybe keep the intensity of the regime, but and take your
Mm-hmm.
rest days. Of course, it's important. But then if you just suddenly go, I'm going to train super intensely for these 12 weeks and then I'm going to stop and then I'm going to do absolutely nothing for a month, it's so much harder to get back to the gym
To
routine
get back,
after
yeah,
that.
absolutely.
Right. So, yeah, exactly. It's the same thing with like sort of my writing schedule. So I thought if I take it easy and I start exploring some ideas and research and sort of just starting to piece together this second book, but at a pace that doesn't feel that pressure, then that's a wonderful way to start. And by the time I'm finished with this first novel, I've kind of already got this spark to build a fire on, from that second novel.
Mm-hmm.
And the story started to take shape and I was so excited about it. And I had written, I think it was 30 or 40,000 words of that book. And quite a lot of it now has changed because, the plot's like changing direction slightly, again, as
Yeah.
I'm still learning. But the first couple of chapters were finished. And all I needed for this competition was to submit the first part. And I thought, is it greedy of me to enter this? Because I haven't even like finished sort of the polished final version of my first one. And I just thought, oh, what the heck? Once again, I've got nothing to lose. So I submitted it. But I really didn't think I was going to win because there are so many incredible writers and there's so much talent out there. And I just thought, well, why me? And I had a very close and wonderful friend who told me, well, why not you? I also work with a holistic coach who I sort of jokingly call my therapist, and it is therapy, but it's not traditional therapy in the sense that it's very holistic and it's not life coaching. I don't even know how to describe it. It's something else, but where it helps me grow and develop my self-awareness. I had worked with another person like this previously in my life, my friend Melanie, and she's brilliant. And it opened up my eyes to this world of holistic coaching, which is where it really just helps you develop your self-awareness and self-love. And I think over the past 10 years of working on that, it's helped me build a lot of confidence and courage. So this all culminated, long story short, into me just saying, okay, why not submit it? And on
You
the night
won.
of, yeah, on the night, it's so funny. On the night of that award, first of all, I I feel like I looked awful because I had come straight from work, and no matter how much you try and freshen up at the end of the day, I looked scraggly. And I was really tired because we've been having a really busy phase at work as well in my day job. And then Luigi, the judge, had read out prize number 3. So there are 3 winners. So he had read out the 3rd place winner, read an excerpt from it, done that for the 2nd one. And I just thought, okay, well, that's it. I haven't won. It's okay. These stories sound really cool. Maybe I'll try again sometime down the line. Let me just go and continue focusing on my book and the agent. I just thought if I have any shot at winning, it'll be 2nd or 3rd place, but there's no way it's going to be the first one. So the moment he had finished reading that 3rd and 2nd place winner revelation, I just thought, okay, well, that's that. And so I had decided in that moment, this just isn't going to happen for me. And that's okay. I was at peace with it. And then he starts reading it and he goes, it was a wonderful novel that's in this fantasy world, blah, blah, blah. And, really high concepts. And I thought, okay, that sounds cool. And then he starts reading it. And he said, he didn't say my name first. And he said, I'm going to start reading you a little excerpt from the novel. And he starts reading the opening chapter, the summary of the opening chapter. And I kind of turned around and looked at my friend Stacy, who was next to me. And I grabbed her arm and I thought, oh my God. I just said to her,
that sounds like my work.
Yeah. And I was kind of tripping over my words. And I just thought, I'm much better on paper. Yeah. But I just grabbed her and I said, but that's me. And are those my words? Is he actually saying my words? Or is it someone else whose book sounds exactly like mine? And I started freaking out. And Stacy grabs me and she goes, it's yours. You've won. I'm like, this isn't happening. And she's like, it's happening. And it was so embarrassing and really funny now that I look back on it, because I burst into tears. And it's like, you always have this idea that you're going to play it so cool and be like, thank you. I'm so gracious when you win. And there was nothing cool at all about it, to the point where I ugly cried. And the woman sitting behind me, she was sitting this woman I didn't know sitting in the row behind me very kindly taps me on the shoulder and offers me a tissue. Oh, it was so funny. It was really sweet of her. And then I couldn't stop. Every time I started to compose myself, I started sobbing again. And I just thought, oh God, any of the pictures in this are going to be horrific. And then we walked up to the stage to shake hands with the judge afterwards. And I wanted to be cool and say something wonderful or just normal. And I just said, thank you so much. You have no idea what this means to me. You made me ugly cry. And that's how I said to the judge. Oh, I cringe so hard now when I look back on it. But you know what? It's because
it's real. It's a real emotion. Yeah. It's real.
Yeah, nothing cool about it. Now I've learned this about myself. I'm never going to be cool about it, and it's fine. It's also because honestly, and I think it was so much more to me than just that win. As I just said, I had been going through such a difficult time of my life. And it's like, I think we've all gone through these phases where you've got like challenge after challenge after challenge. And no matter how confident you are or how good you are at something or whatever it is that you've experienced in the ups and downs of your career or your life or whatever, we go through periods of our life where you face such like hardship and struggle that you lose your belief in yourself. And I think that's something that's really tragic. And it happens to all of us at some point. I was in that. And it's like, as much as you would love to think logically, the logical part of your brain is saying, no, you got this. And you're still putting one step in front of the other and you still get up and keep going. It's the emotions that haven't caught up yet. And I don't remember who said this phrase, but there's this wonderful quote that's like, the longest journey you'll ever take or the hardest journey you'll ever take is the 18 inches from your head to your heart. And it's so true. And I really wish I could remember who said that right now, but it was really profound to me the first time I'd heard it. And it makes a huge difference getting that feeling from the thoughts from up here with the feelings that are in here, because when those are aligned, I feel like you can do anything. And I was not in a place where those were in line. And so I was going through the motions. My stubbornness, I'm extremely stubborn. My stubbornness kept me going. I'm very disciplined. I keep fighting for things, but I just felt like I was kind of clawing my way up while I was sliding down at the same time. And so it was completely unexpected for me. And I kind of subscribe to the belief that we shouldn't need validation. You don't need other people to tell you that you're worthy or love yourself, because if you rely on that, then that's a very dangerous game to play. You should come from within. But having said that, I also think it's really important to have that validation once in a while, because it helps you believe in yourself when you can't. And hearing it from other people sometimes, it helps to remind you that you're not crazy. And, it helps to bring the perspective that actually, like, someone else thinks I'm great, and if they believe in me, then I should honor that by trying to believe in myself. And I think it really means a lot. And you can really see it when people say so or do so sincerely.
Yeah. So I wanted to touch on, so the award I would say is one of the heights so far, but in terms of passion, how has it always been this way? Like, when did you discover that you were actually really passionate about words and writing? And how have you been able to keep the spark, as you mentioned? Have you been able to be consistent to keep the spark all through to this point?
Okay, so it's sort of funny. When I was growing up, everyone says, when did you know you wanted to be a writer? Like, not to me specifically. I mean, I often read this in interviews, and I'm always really intrigued by these stories of people who say, I've known from the moment of so and so. I was doing it while I realized. I had already been doing it when I realized because I just didn't see it. I think a lot of it is part of my cultural background. You know, I'm half East Asian. My mom is from Taiwan, and I'm half Arab. My dad is a combination of like mixed Middle Eastern background. And in both of these cultures, it's like math, science, engineering. You know, these are the things that are most traditionally highly valued. And the creative arts, as valued as they are, they're not often seen as the careers that you go and chase. And I read this really interesting article or a thought piece once that said also, when you are the children of immigrants, and like, you know, in my case, I'm the child of expats, you know, but you often, when you have a family where your family or your parents have moved to another country in pursuit of a better life and, you know, greater opportunities for their children, you often tend to find these people pushing their children towards careers that make more money, like in the traditional sense, that are more assured, or seem to be more traditional in those routes, because creative jobs are more risky, and they push you towards that direction with love, with the idea that they want that stability and that growth for you, you know. And I have to admit, like, I think you know, we've discussed this before, you know, many of our friendship coffees, it is very hard to get recognized, especially when you are a minority, because the opportunities aren't out there. So they are out there, but they're harder to seize. And so I think, yes, we need to face that cold, hard reality. And there is a very practical aspect to, for example, when I went to college, would have loved to go to art school, but my parents were like, you can do that, but we're not helping you go there because it's not feasible as a way to sustain your life. You have to be responsible, you have to be practical, like find a way to actually live. And that's why these things are often relegated to hobbies. So when I graduated, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, worked as a paralegal in a law firm for a while. And in all of that, I found the cases very interesting. But again, now that I look back on it, things I found interesting were the stories behind each case. It was the writing, the editing, and, you know, all these legal documents. It was the writing. It really, you know, you had to obviously write very well for that. And so that was the part I enjoyed most. And then I started an internship where it was like a writing based marketing and PR. And that was the part I enjoyed the most. The newsletters were my favorite thing to do. And then I got a little freelance writing gig. And as I started doing more and more of that, I came to this realization that I think I owe it to myself to try. And it was not easy because my cultural background, like I said, it was very difficult to explain that to my parents. I remember at one point, my parents, like, they didn't mean any harm. They meant it with love, but they just said, when I came to them and said, listen, so I don't want to do this. I'm going to try and be a writer. I'm trying to get a job at a newspaper or magazine. And they just looked at me and went, you're going to be poor for the rest of your life. And I'm like, okay, thanks. And you know what? To a certain extent, they were right, in the sense that a lot of the time through my career, I have been like, I'm in this for the love, not the money, you know? But the thing is, it's funny because throughout the years, sometimes I have wondered when things got really hard, have I made a horrible mistake? Have I been an idiot? Should I have chased a different path? Maybe I'm just not cut out for this. You have to be exceptional. Maybe I'm not good enough. And these are all of the sort of intrusive, insecure thoughts that come, and, you know, these negative self-talk thoughts, they're actually what's stopping you, ironically, because there is opportunity out there, you know. And I think this idea that if everyone in the world suddenly thought, okay, well, I'm never going to make it, and they would never try, then they would never make it, you know, because they wouldn't try. So at a certain point in my career, I wondered, have I made a horrible mistake? Should I be doing this or should I not? And I have really come to the realization that, to be honest, I actually don't have much of a choice, in the sense that I think there are some things that you make a conscious choice to do and some that your soul speaks to you for. And I have tried doing other types of roles. I have tried entertaining other types of opportunities. And you know what? I tried them because I thought, instead of being stubborn, let me be open-minded and try it out, because I'll never know until I try. And I realized that just not happy doing those things, and you have to be true to yourself. And so I am happiest when I'm doing those things. It's because I am a writer and I love doing that. When I look back over it, you know, my childhood, I would create silly little like newspapers and magazines. My sister and I, when we were kids, we created this newspaper for the family, full of family news. And we called it Decadius because it was filled with all this news. And we thought, we'll release it once a decade. I mean, it was just a silly
Wow.
childhood activity, but I mean, I had so much fun doing that. And I think I had just, if I had grown up in a culture that supported the idea of this as a viable career, I probably would have realized a lot sooner. But the thought of it never entered my mind because it was just a hobby. And so by the time I realized, oh yeah, I'm a writer and this is what I wanted to do with my life, I was already doing all the things. I had to do it to realize. So yeah, it's sort of strange
So you
how I got
discovered
there.
by doing it. You discovered in the process. And Decadius is such a cool name. It sounds a bit like a spell, like Harry Potter Decadius or something. It sounds very,
Yeah,
very
I
cool.
mean, it was ridiculous. Like with our weather, I mean, it's my sister and I, but the weather for the next decade was it's going to keep changing. That was our weather forecast. It was so ridiculous.
Oh.
So funny. But we
Now,
had so much
a
fun
lot.
doing it.
Oh, I can imagine. And you know what? You doing that as a child and becoming the editor in chief of a magazine. That was literally. It's just like full circle. At that
Yeah.
moment, that must have been a full circle moment for you.
Another point in my life where I thought I never believed this was possible. And I remember the first time I picked up a copy of Women's Health when I was in the US, and it was the American version. And I opened it up to the page where they had the names of all the editors of the international version. I, once again, was absolutely not cool. And I cried a little bit. And I think it was like I was in a Dwayne Reed or a CBS. And I'm like, oh my God, I made it. Because I think younger me never would have imagined it, And also, the world
Mm.
was very different back then. I was just a kid growing up in this sort of like beach town in this desert land. And, it was like all the cool things were in America. They were all in the UK. And it felt amazing to dream of those things, but it was never something that I would ever be able to do because it felt so far beyond. And the world has become so much more connected and globalized. And these opportunities are now spreading. And it's a wonderful thing. I'm super grateful for it.
Yeah, you're right. The opportunities are things are better now, but I would say when it comes to women generally, and in terms of the chance to chase our passion, I think there's still a big struggle. And
Mm-hmm.
going back to what you said about even being immigrants, but apart from being immigrants, sometimes being a woman is 2 times harder to chase just our passion because we have to be logical, we have to be practical, especially those
Mm-hmm.
that decide to have a family, have children. So how does one begin to still hang on to that connection, as you said, the connection between the mind and the heart, and you know that this is something you really want to do? What advice would you give in terms of holding on to that passion and exploring it, even though you have to still be practical, you still have to have a job,
Mm-hmm.
you have to pay your bills? Well, how does one hold on to that passion?
So it's interesting as well, this whole concept. So I'm 38 years old, and I've a lot of the time people said, oh, but you're lucky, it's because you don't have kids. And I understand that a lot of the time it's a choice, but also remember that
Mm.
there are many women out there for whom it's not a choice. And I'm not just talking about infertility, I'm also talking about the fact that we live in a world where financially there is a lot of pressure. I mean, obviously your mom, this, and a lot of people that I know, a lot of women my age, they chose not to have children, not because they didn't want them, but because it was a choice between should I have children or would I be financially struggling for the rest of my life? And I think that's a very unfair decision to have to
Mm-hmm.
make. There are also hundreds of women out there who maybe they would have loved to have a family, but they didn't meet the right stable partner with which to have that. And I understand that we live in a world where it's wonderful that, women can be independent and go out there and be like, I just want to have a family and I don't need a partner to have a child. And that's great. I mean, not just women, obviously, anyone can do that, but it's, again, financially, the impact of that, it's a big decision to make. And it's so much more than just, do I want kids or do I not want kids? And I think this nuance of it's a choice or it's not a choice, I think people could
Mm.
maybe do with being a little more sensitive to that, because there are so many shades of gray in
Absolutely.
between. Sometimes it's a
Mm-hmm.
choice that you made out of limited options and it was the best of the choices you had as opposed to a pure choice. And that can make it very hard. With that in mind, I think for the ones who maybe had to make a choice about having a family or not, or didn't have the choice, it is so important to have that passion. Because I think, and for the ones who do have wonderful families, it is equally as important to have that passion, and both of them for different and very much the same reasons. So I know I'm sounding like I'm going in a circle here, but I guess my point is that if you tie your identity to only one part of who you are, that to me is the danger zone. And so for me, having the passion, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's important actually to have multiple passions and to not lose sight of those, because you're a mom, but you're not just a mom. You're also Tween, you're also a friend, you're also a sister, you're all these different things. And in my case, yes, I'm a writer, but I also love to draw. I'm a massive nerd. I love all of my sort of pop culture, fantasy, sci-fi stuff. These are all different passions. And I'm also really into sports and well-being. So this concept of like finding and pursuing your passion, obviously there's going to be certain passions that are the bigger ones at certain points of your life. But remember, life is it's not a linear, journey. There are ups and downs. So I think the sooner we accept that it's great to have multiple passions, embrace them, the sooner we can understand that everyone has different chapters of our lives. And in some parts of our lives or different chapters, this passion is going to be the dominant one. So for example, if I had kids, maybe they would take priority and they would be my greatest passion at this point. And then maybe when my circumstances change, in terms of my practical day to day, then another passion come forward. It doesn't mean you lose them. You always keep them there, sort of close to the chest. And when it's time for them, because you love them, you can come back to them. And with that in mind, also, I think a lot of the time people have this fear that if you loved something so deeply, some people fall out of love with their passions, and then they feel guilty about wanting to move on to something else. That's okay. Because again, we evolve. We keep changing throughout our lives. So your passions are going to evolve. And in my case, it's always been writing and storytelling related. Yes, I'm very fortunate in that sense, creating things, but actually my greatest passion when I was in my 20s was I just wanted to be a journalist. I loved to write. But if I had to choose between being a magazine journalist and writing books, I wanted the magazines more at that phase of my life. Now I want to write books more. And it's okay because I've changed. We evolve constantly, and it's natural that those passions will evolve with us.
Absolutely. What you said about evolving and the fact that we should come to terms with the fact that we can have multiple passions. And even as a child, how you explore a certain thing and then you become like maybe you're a teenager, it changes. When you're in your 20s, it changes. When you're in your 30s, it changes. And some passions, like you said, they are bigger than others. And some people will still have to hang on to their normal day jobs, and it has nothing to do with what they're passionate about. But it's just maybe a person's passion could be, I want to learn how to skate. And even though she's never going to be an Olympian or even a professional skater, but that's something that she's always wanted to do. A person can always still explore that whilst keeping on their normal day job and the normal practical things that we have to do. It's just finding that balance and not losing sight of this passion if it's important to the person, So I think I read that I think it was The Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, where she talked about as creatives as well, when we're trying to explore passions and we're measuring it with what success of that passion looks like, then it puts a burden on us as creatives and okay, we have to do this and this is how it looks like to be successful in this passion. And then you just end up freezing and not doing anything because you're measuring it with the success of the world.
Yeah, that's so true. And by the way, to add to that, that's so true because I think a lot of the time also when we hear the word passion, especially in the age of social media where, there's so much media out there about like your passion, turn your passion into a business, pursue your passion. It doesn't have to have a list of things that you have to check off along the way. And a passion doesn't need to be something big. Like I have a friend who is like a coffee fanatic. She's obsessed with coffee. And it's not just like because she doesn't get enough sleep. She sleeps just fine. She just really loves coffee, And if you ask her about different kinds of beans and latte art or whatever, like she knows everything about coffee. And she doesn't want to make a career of it. And that's okay. And people keep saying, oh, you should do something wonderful with it. If she decides to one day, that's great. Good for her. We will all support it because she's great at it. But she just gets so much pleasure out of it. And is that not enough? I think sometimes it's like, for example, so even with the writing, just because someone is really passionate about writing, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to also become a writing professional or write a book, or even with the book. I mean, I wrote this post. I write a blog post maybe like once a month or once every 2 months, but I had written one that was 5 questions to ask yourself before you start writing a book. And one of the questions was, do you actually want to write a book? Because a novel is a huge thing. Maybe what you want to write is a screenplay. Maybe it's a novella. Maybe it's a short story. Writing comes in so many different forms. Maybe you just want to write a personal blog. Maybe you want to write a journal for yourself. It doesn't always have to be something huge. And so I think pursuing your passion for your whole life, or your passions plural, it's literally just the things that give you pockets of happiness and that make life feel joyful and fulfilled. So it's as simple as, what makes you happy? What do you love to do? And just do more of those things. It sounds so simple. I know obviously it's more
Yeah.
complicated than that. I think that's the core of it, right?
No, that is the core of it. What makes you happy? What do you do? And you can do easily without even, well, saying that before I put myself in a knot here, even things you're passionate about, you can still struggle with. And we
Yes.
know this because as writers, there are days where we just feel like, we can't do this. So you can, even with your
Completely.
passion, you can still have moments where you're not feeling very inspired or you're not feeling very
Yeah.
motivated to do it. But it's just what are
Yeah.
those things? It's plural because it's never one thing sometimes. What are
Mhm.
those things that make you happy, and actively include that in your day-to-day life?
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Also,
life can be very boring or stressful, just
yeah.
full of
Why are you here?
chores.
Yeah. Otherwise, I feel like I like, at least just from my own personal journey, I feel like if I didn't have passions or things I love, then I'm just existing. I'm not living, and that's kind of a big deal. That difference for me. What you said about this occasional struggles along the way, I actually think that is part of what makes a passion great. Because if you think about a job, for example, if you do the same job for like, I don't know, 30 years, and it's the same thing day in, day out, most people, even if you really enjoy that job, you're going to feel unfulfilled because as human beings, we thrive on challenges, but there are positive challenges and then there are bad challenges. There are good struggles and bad struggles. This sense of accomplishment and growing in something, it's that actually fuels it. And I think among some of my writer friends, actually this brilliant friend of mine who's a wonderful fantasy writer, and he and I were talking recently about how we both feel like a new level of writer that we've never felt like before, but we had to go through our sort of dark night of the soul to get here. We went through a point where like, I hate my book, I suck at this, I'm awful at writing, what am I doing? And it's because you had kind of hit a plateau in your previous, like, sort of, I don't know, skills or abilities, and you needed change. And it's the same way that we as people evolve through our lives. The skills and the way we indulge in these passions can evolve. The coffee friend I mentioned, I mean, first it started with her going to discover different coffee shops and learn about different coffees. But at one point, she took a barista course, not for anything like, business like, but just because she just wanted to learn it, just for the joy of it. And these challenges are part of what fuels the continual like evolution of this passion, so that
Absolutely.
if it's not always the same thing constantly and forever, then we won't get sick of it.
Now, how does one, if we doing this on a daily and maybe it's not linked to our job, and we get to a point where there's like a writer's block. For writers, there's a writer's block where
Mhm.
you feel stuck. You feel like you can't bring out anything. You can't do anything creative at that point. So what have you done to get yourself out of that fog, or get yourself out of that situation where you're just feeling bland, you're not feeling very creative, you're not feeling like you're producing anything or anything is flowing? What have you
Mhm.
done to get yourself out of that situation?
Oh, the dreaded writer's block. So I have really struggled with the remedy because the remedy is the opposite of my nature, or at least the way I've grown up, which is when I struggle with something, I double down on it and work even harder. I'm super stubborn. I'm really disciplined. So normally I'm just like, no, work harder, go get it done. The solution was to embrace the opposite. It was to surrender. It's not been easy, but I have finally come to a place where I've learned how to do this. And so I think this concept of do something every single day, it sounds wonderful, but like life gets in the way. So like everything's going to be different for everyone. Yeah, we're not the same, and that's what makes life interesting. It's got to be right for you, your life, your journey. So for example, I have a friend who he likes to write for 30 minutes to an hour every day. That's how he got his book done. That's never going to work for me because it works once in a while, sort of, but I'll burn out that way. And so I think you have to figure out what works for you. And in my case, I've realized that when I hit that writer's block, that's my body and my mind telling me I need a break. And the reason why I'm at a block is because something doesn't feel right. The story is stuck. The characters are not right. There's something in there that I need, like it's a knot that I need to untangle. And there are multiple ways to do that. So I'll try them all. I could sit in front of a computer and stare at that screen and play with the words and be like, how do I untangle this knot? Well, that's not working. Or I could go for a walk. Maybe that's where I'll figure it out. Maybe I'll go to the gym. That's where I'll figure it out. Maybe I just need to change where I'm sitting. If I've been sitting in the same cafe for like 3 months and I need to go sit somewhere different, because all of these things, and the key is that it shifts your perspective. And I think
That's a
it's
good
like,
point.
when you're trying to figure out a problem in your everyday life, however big or small, and you're just like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. And this is a solution, blah, blah. And you just kind of end up going in circles. The only way to get out of the circle is to change its shape, you know? And so I figured that, at least for me, beating the writer's block is learning to give myself more space, whether that is some time or greater perspective or whatever form it comes in. And the annoying thing is sometimes you have to give time. And so, the annoying part being that I wish I had the answer, and I'm like, no, but I want to get it done now, and I wanted to finish it this weekend. And I know it's hard when you've got deadlines, whether they are self-imposed or imposed by, an editor or whoever. But like, you keep thinking about it, but you do that intentionally. So sometimes if you put something aside intentionally, rather than the whole I'll deal with it later vibe, but you're like, I'm gonna let this marinate, and so you can actually focus on something else. You won't feel guilty about putting it aside, and that mental and emotional freedom probably will help you figure it out. So yeah, it's a lot easier said than done.
I like that you used the word marinate, because that was exactly what was in my mind whilst you were talking. Sometimes you just need to let the meat marinate intentionally for
exactly.
Overnight, and then you look at it with a fresh perspective, because like you said, sometimes you're just stuck and it's just not working. So there are times I've stared at the screen and I'm staring at the screen. The screen is staring back at me, and someone needs to move and something needs to happen.
That feeling.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just taking the time. Yeah.
In that marination, that feeling when you said staring at the screen and staring back at you. I know that feeling. It's a horrible feeling. It's so much pressure. And I think that reminded me of something. It's that I think we also live in a world that values, like, you call it whatever you want, KPIs, ROI, whatever acronym you want to shove in there. Like, we live in the kind of world where it's like you always have to show something tangible. And so we often associate, and I used to do this all the time. It's taken me a really long time to get over this, but you would associate the idea of writing with, this is how many words I've got. And yeah, I understand that practically speaking, you need to just sit down and write the book, like, it's not going to write itself. No matter how much you might dream about it, think about it, you need to sit down and practically get it done. Having said that, that's not the only way to progress with a book. And I used to beat myself up constantly thinking, oh, I'm so behind on my book. I haven't written anything, blah, blah, blah. But actually, if I sat down and I forced myself to write like 4,000 words on this one day, and there were 4,000 useless words, they might not be useless in the sense that writing them taught me that that's not the right way that scene should go. But I guess what I'm trying to say is writing isn't only by physically putting words down on a page. Sometimes I'll wash the dishes and I'll be like, brainwave, this is how that scene gets fixed. That is writing it in my head. Sometimes I'll be having a conversation with a friend. This literally happened day before yesterday, and so it's on my mind. And I was having a conversation with a friend, and afterwards, I was walking home and I thought, oh my gosh, that is literally the conversation we just had, is literally the conversation that my two characters need to have. That is what they wanted to say to each other. Me and my friend just said that to each other. Now I know how the next chapter should go, because the emotion that I was looking for them to feel in that part of those characters' journey is exactly what my friend and I just experienced. That's how I convey that. And so if I hadn't let myself have the space to go and have this conversation with this friend, and I was just staring at the computer screen, wouldn't have figured that out. So I have a friend who calls this pre-writing, but I think it's just learning how to figure out the story knots in your head as well. It's really important.
So how do you juggle full-time job and writing? Tell us, Yi-Hwa, what do you do? How has the balance been for those two things?
I'm not going to lie, it's not easy. As you can see, I look tired. I am tired. I'm very tired. I feel like, there's all these memes out there that are like, being an adult means just being tired at all times and telling each other how tired you are. It's kind of true. And I know that's not exclusive to writers, but it is a combination of that. Be nice to yourself and find discipline. So I have a schedule. I put it in it's kind of the same way I treat the gym. Again, it's important to me. I treat it like an appointment, because if I don't do that, I will never get it done. But the freedom and flexibility comes in. For example, like every Saturday is my writing day. It's a non-negotiable. It's super important to me. Of course, if it's a friend's birthday or something, then I'm going to go to that. But I need to understand how important it is, because if I keep putting that writing date with myself as like the lowest priority on my calendar, I'm teaching myself that my dreams are not important. So I have to treat it with the utmost respect and priority. And so I put it in my calendar. I literally physically book it into my calendar, my color coordinated nerdy calendar. And I treat that appointment with the utmost importance. And if I need to change it for some reason, I will do so with intention. So if I need to shift it, I'll shift it to another day. If I need to cancel it, it'll be maybe because sometimes I'm tired. So some Saturdays, I will literally sit down and write from like 9 to 5, like it's a working day. Other times, I'll only manage 2 hours because I'm really tired. So I think the flexibility comes in, do as much as I can. Don't feel guilty if I couldn't sit for the whole day, but just show up, and all these quotes about how like life is and progress is about the sum of the actions that you put in. Just keep showing up. It doesn't matter what form you show up in, as long as you keep showing up for it, it will get done, but the book is not going to write itself. So yeah, it's sort of this balance of be disciplined, stick to it, but also be nice to yourself. And I think that's one of the hardest things I've had to accept in the last few years, which is I thought I could finish this a lot faster. It's very hard for non-author friends to understand. And I appreciate that, you understand this too. But a lot of the time people mean well when they say, oh, isn't your book done yet? When can I buy it? And you're just like, maybe in 3 years, because it's really hard. Because if you think about it, like just do the math, like if you can write only on weekends, obviously it would be nice to write on weekdays, but we've all got laundry and, traffic to sit in and dinner to cook and all sorts of things. And I work with words. My brain is melted by the time I get home. I often don't have the energy to write. It's not going to be the best use of my time. And so if you think about it, if you only write like 1 or 2 days a weekend for the whole year, and then you remove that I've got to have holidays and, there's birthdays and there's rest time, like what, 30 to 50 days a year to work on a book? It's not very much when you think about it. So I think it's understanding that stop focusing so much on comparing how quickly someone else finished their book. Each book is also different. Someone who's writing a story that's based on our real world, they don't have to do world building. Someone who's writing some super epic fantasy, they have to do a lot of world building. So focus on your own journey and just keep showing up for yourself. It will be done. Just don't give up on it. Because if you remember why you're writing it in the first place, you won't stop.
Well, you made 3 amazing points, which I just want to reiterate. So obviously there's the why, which is what you just mentioned. Why are you doing this? And you also touched on the fact that we should not put our passion behind in the backseat, because this is something that we do a lot, especially women, when we're catering to, full-time job or maybe our partners, or we've got other responsibilities. And then it's easy to kind of put your passions or what means a lot to you on the back burner and say, okay, yeah, I'll get to it later. And I love the fact that you actually schedule it and book it. It's like having an appointment for yourself. This thing matters to me, so I'm going to schedule it and put it as a priority on this day. So I think that's such a useful tip. And yeah, it's just showing up. Like you said, again, the third thing is just being consistent and not beating yourself up. If there's a day you can do 30 minutes, that's fine. If there's a day you can do 2 hours, then that's fine. But it's just being consistent and just showing up for yourself, as opposed to putting it at the back burner and say, oh, this is not important. Meanwhile, it is important. And if we don't treat the things that are important to us, eventually we have breakdowns, or we feel like our life is not having the meaning it should have. Because our passions give our lives meaning, just like you mentioned earlier. So thank you so much for sharing those tips. What are you currently working on, and what are your hopes for the future?
Okay, so I know I talk a lot. I just want to add one little line. I just wanted to say also, like, as a mom of 3 as well, and when you're in relationships or whatever, it can be hard to operate in a silo. So another huge part of it is actually having the support of your family, your loved ones, your friends, and the people around you. So I know that, for example, our friendship has been really motivating for me, because you believe in me and I believe in you, and we keep each other going. During the moments where I struggle to keep on going because I'm exhausted, you motivate me, and vice versa. So does my friend Stacy and my other writer friends. I think having that sense of community, it's really important. And also in your case with your kids, and in my case, I don't have kids, but like with my partner and the rest of my family, when you really are that passionate about something, helping them understand why it means so much to you and having them understand your why, it's a really powerful thing, because then you don't have to feel like you're fighting or pushing back when you make that time for yourself. So for example, if your kids know that mom needs this time for herself and they understand why, it's also, I think, very healthy for kids and our family to grow up with this idea that, yeah, we kind of each have our own things. Like, I'm very grateful that my partner, everyone's like, oh, don't you ever see your boyfriend? I'm like, yeah, he understands. Like on a weekend when I'm spending too much time if I'm tired, he'll say, look, have a lie-in. But at some point he'll be like, shouldn't you be getting up to go work on your book? And I'm like, I'm really tired. And he goes, if you don't go work on your book, I'm going to have to hear you whinge about how bad you feel about not working later. So just go. And I need to hear it sometimes. So I think talking to the people around us about what we're hoping to achieve and why we care about it so much, that support, and to do so not in a way that's aggressive, like, I have to do this, it's important, you better respect it. No, not like that. In a way where it's done with empathy and where we too respect theirs in turn. I think it's really important to give that space to each other, because that's how you can help pick each other up when things are really, really hard and you keep on going. Absolutely. So yeah.
What are you currently working on? Tell us a little bit about your book without telling us about your book, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
Because I know you, as a writer, you don't want to reveal everything. So just tell us what you can.
So my first novel, the one that won the fellowship, is a young adult speculative or a social science fiction. I don't really know. It's science fiction, but not the spaceships and aliens kind. It's more about the parallel dimension kind of alternate worlds vibe. And when I say that, I mean a world that's quite different from our own, right? So soft science fiction, if you want to put it that way. But it's ultimately a character-driven story. And so I am on what I'd like to call my final draft before querying, because I know that one day, hopefully once I get an agent, they will probably have some edits for me. And then if I get to sell this book and get an editor, they will probably have some edits for me, because I've learned that this is part of the journey. Also, I can't tell you what draft this is, because I have rewritten it so many times. Sometimes when I've reached the end, sometimes when I'm halfway through and I'm like, oh no, this isn't right. Sometimes it's a full rewrite. Sometimes it's just a light edit. But this book has gone through so many forms. And I think part of it is because, as my friend Steph likes to put it, I was building a plane while trying to fly it at the same time, or rather trying to fly it while building it at the same time. I was trying to learn how to write a book while writing a book. And so I made I used to think of them as mistakes along the way, but I learned by doing a lot of the time. I study and then you have to go put it into practice. And as I wrote this book, I was like, okay, this isn't working. I need to go back and change this. It is now in what I'd like to think of as its final form. So I'm trying to get to the end of this final form rewrite so that I can start querying that. And in the meantime, I'm also working on a first draft of my second novel, which is a fantasy novel, which is the one that won the writing prize in 2023. It's a lot to do, but I'll get there.
That is amazing. That is amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for sharing your passion, sharing your tips, and just making us realize that we should just be consistent and show up for ourselves. We normally end the podcast by asking 3 questions. So I'm just going to go ahead and ask you these questions. What is a life lesson you've learned recently?
To be as nice to yourself as you would to other people that you care about.
Expand more on that. Just tell us what made you come to that realization.
It touches on some of the things you were saying about, this pressure that women feel, that, a lot of the time that everybody feels. I think sometimes we can be so mean to ourselves. If you had a friend who was going through something, how you would counsel her or him, and what you would, advise them to do. For example, if someone's so exhausted, they're going to burn out, you'd say, hey, allow yourself to take a break. Why don't we do that for ourselves more often? Or if you had a friend who's talented and amazing at something and they just don't have the courage to go and chase it, you would tell them, you're awesome, you've got this, and I'm right behind you. So imagine how powerful it would be if we could also do that for ourselves. So I think for me, one of the things that's been so transformative in my life in the past several years is learning how to also be one of my own biggest cheerleaders. It's not easy. I mean, as evidenced by the way, thank you for having me on this podcast. The fact that I'm super caffeine fueled today. So sorry, I'm such a chatterbox today.
No, you're not. No. It's been so good. Oh no, but I mean, that is being our own cheerleader. And it's true. Why are we not nice to ourselves? We do everything. We work hard. We advise people. And then when it comes to ourselves, for our self-care, we just kind of put it at the back burner. So yes, that is such a good point.
And it's actually through my best friend, Carrie. She's the one who helped me realize this, because one day I was talking to her about the way I feel about some of the sort of challenges and struggles that I face. And as I said it, she burst into tears, and I couldn't understand why she was crying. And she just said, she was saying it from the depths of her heart. And she said, I wish you could see yourself the way that I see you, because if only you could do that, you can't imagine what you would be capable of. And when she said that to me, it really hit home. I'm getting a little teary, but I love her to bits. She's one of the toughest, most amazing, strongest people I know. And when she said that, I realized that that's how I feel about her when she struggles. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we all do that for each other. That's genuine love, that's genuine friendship. And if I were to think about my teenage self and how I would want to encourage her, imagine I spent so much of my life waiting for that support and validation from other people. I'm super grateful to have had it and the amazing friendships I've made at this point of my life. But wow, imagine if I had loved myself like that all along. It's really powerful.
That actually hit me as well, because I just thought about all the times that I've kind of put myself down, even especially as a teenager, and when you're early 20s, you put yourself down because you're comparing yourself to other people. And imagine if we'd given ourselves the grace all that time and just cheered ourselves on and said, okay, you know what, you've got this, keep going. That would have made
Yeah.
such a huge difference.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm getting a bit emotional as well. Now,
Sorry.
moving on.
Okay.
When do you feel the happiest? When do you feel, what are you doing when you feel like completely happy?
When I'm in tune with myself and honoring myself in whatever form that may take. So whether that's like having a good gym session or yoga session, or I'm writing and I'm loving the process, or, cooking, whatever it is, like doing something that makes me feel really aligned with myself. I love creating things that makes me really happy. And honestly, like spending quality time with awesome people. I love having deep and meaningful conversations, strange life philosophy discussions. It's just, I love it. It makes me really happy.
And if you could tell 5-year-old Yi-Hwa something, what would you tell her?
It's funny. People often say, like, what's your earliest memory, whatever. I can't remember anything from my life from before I was like, I don't know, maybe 8, something. Like, I don't have many clear memories. So I'd probably, to be honest, 5-year-old me probably wouldn't remember what I tell her, but I would give her a massive, great big hug and just tell her I love her. I would probably rather talk to maybe like the sort of 14 to 15-year-old me if I had a chance to go back and speak to my younger self. Okay. I think that would probably be more profound.
What would you tell 14-year-old Yi-Hwa?
To not worry so much about people thinking you're weird. It's okay, because you will meet people who are just as weird as you, and that will make it not weird. It's a good thing. It's just different, and weird is not a bad thing. Yeah, you'll find your people someday. There, even if you sometimes feel like I'm so alone, even when I'm surrounded by people, because I don't have anyone who really gets me. And I had a couple of great friends like that at that age. I had one really powerful friendship that made me feel like that. But when she moved away, I felt so lonely because I thought, oh gosh, who's going to understand me now? I think I would have reminded that version of me that, hey, there's a whole great big world out there. There are others like you. You will find them and they're going to be amazing friends. But also to remember that you have to learn to love yourself first before trying so hard to make other people love you. So that's, again, in that sort of self-love vibe. But I think it's one of the most powerful things that can change our lives, because when you learn how to do that, you will spend less time doing what other people think you should be doing and more of what you actually want to be doing. Yeah, even if it feels like you're swimming upstream. And also maybe like buy Bitcoin when it first comes out and then sell it when it's good.
I love how you included that practical, logical, buy Bitcoin, invest, and do something.
Yeah, because like that version of me had no idea about any of those things, and I'm like, oh, if only I knew.
Crypto. Yeah, we didn't know crypto was a thing. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and like for all of its ups and downs, like when I hear that story about the guy who, like, what was it? He spent like one Bitcoin or less than a Bitcoin on like a slice of pizza, and I'm like, oh, I understand. I can only imagine how he must be feeling. But yeah, or like invest in Apple or something, or maybe just listen to my older brother when he told me that from my very first salary, even if it's the equivalent of 100 dirhams a month, put it in a savings account. But hey, that's part of like the overconfidence of youth, right? It's like, I'll be fine. I'm not going to need it. It's not important. But you know what? We all find our way. I think, jokes aside, no regrets. I think if I hadn't gone through all the things that I did, I wouldn't be who I am now. I think the experiences that we have shape us. I don't think you need to struggle or go through trauma to be able to tell great stories. But I do think that experiencing things that maybe are not always so easy, they help you build perspective and empathy and learn how to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And that can make you a better writer, a better person, a better parent. I don't know, whatever. I'm not a parent. I wouldn't know, but I would, theorize that. But I think in general,
no, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
Just understanding people better. So yeah, I probably wouldn't change a thing. Maybe would have changed the glasses I wore when I was 10 because they were not a good look.
What was wrong with the glasses you wore when you were 10?
Oh my gosh.
Were they silver frames? I have a
They
thing
were
against silver frame.
gigantic, huge, round, like brown plastic frames, and I had a mushroom bowl cut. I looked like Harry Potter, and it was not a good look. But you know what? It was the 90s and early 2000s when I grew up, so fashion it's a unique thing at that time. It is. Yeah, I mean, I would also really love to, just as like a final thought, I would really love to tell that version of myself that actually, if you just believe in yourself, I know it's not easy because she really didn't. Everything you dream of, it is possible. You have everything you need within you to do it. The only thing that is holding you back is the fear of wanting it. You know, I think sometimes you want wanting something and the hope of getting something or hoping to have something, it comes with a side of fear because then there's a consequence of what if I don't get it? And obviously, I know it's much easier to, easier said than done to say, oh, just don't feel the fear. But it's when you conquer that fear and you think, well, if I don't try, then you'll never know. And is that regret not worse? So yeah, I think I've learned how to do that as an adult, but sometimes I wonder what my life would look like if I had embraced that boldness when I was younger.
Oh, that's such profound tips and such profound words. Thank you so much, Yi-Hwa, for joining us today. Really appreciate this conversation. All the best.
Thank you so much. It was lovely. Thank you.